You've probably seen this panel before, but what you might not know is that one panel alone helped turn Jujutsu Kaisen into the most unhinged fandom on the internet. How does a fandom become so chaotic that people who've never even watched the show dominate its discussions? How is it possible for a single new-gen anime to have such massive influence on the internet? I'm New, and in this video, I will be dissecting Jujutsu Kaisen's insane run in not only the anime community, but on the entirety of the internet as well. Before we delve into why the most random things Jujutsu Kaisen does goes extremely viral, or why JJK fans are universally accepted as being mentally unstable, we need to cover why the current JJK fanbase is the way it is. In October of 2020, the first season of Jujutsu Kaisen was released, and following this, it gained immense popularity, as this was the time around when anime started going mainstream. And JJK was a popular pick for beginner anime fans because of 3 different reasons. See, Jujutsu Kaisen isn't exactly the most complex anime. While it is part of the Dark Trio, which are these 3 mangas who are known their mature and violent content, the story itself is relatively easy to follow, and the abilities of characters aren't super hard either. The story sits at the perfect equilibrium of not too complex nor too simple. From the very beginning of the manga, we are introduced to 2 characters who represent the pinnacle of power in the verse, Satoru Gojo and Ryomen Sukuna. This story quite literally throws the question towards you on which of them are truly the strongest. Is it the modern-age sorcerer who's blessed by the heavens? Or is it the millennium-old curse who once reigned over the golden age of Jujutsu? It forces you to pick a side, and a division in the community so early on sparks debates and arguments, which invites other people to hop on this train as well. The most obvious reason, however, is its compelling and relatable cast. Take Satoru Gojo, for example. This man single-handedly brings in like 90% of the anime's popularity. He's an egotistical character who lives up to his hype, portrayed as a living god, and let's not forget his beautiful looks. It isn't crazy to say that he alone is more popular than Jujutsu Kaisen itself. But even without Gojo, characters like Sukuna, Nanami, Nobara, Maki, and so many are loved by almost everyone in the fanbase. This genius mix of characters is one of the biggest reasons for why Jujutsu Kaisen skyrocketed in popularity since the very beginning. This isn't where JJK stopped though. It continued to gather fans over time, and the excitement was overwhelming. Add on to the fact that the conclusion of Season 1 was followed by Shibuya Incident, which is regarded as one of the greatest arcs in all of anime. JJK had a promising future. The story was progressing fast, and the manga sales were rising as well. By this time, JJK already sits among the most talked about anime in history, and the best part? Its biggest events weren't even covered yet. But popularity isn't what started the breakdown of the fandom, leaks did. One of the most excruciating habits of the JJK fandom was that it had no patience. While the average manga reader waits weekly or sometimes bi-weekly for their chapters to drop, JJK fans prefer reading leaked, butchered versions of those chapters just 2 or 3 days earlier. This leak culture became so massive in the beginning of 2023 that leaks became the primary source of JJK fans to read. Most of them stopped reading from the official source and would simply gain their knowledge through leaks. For reference, the most popular leak source was this Twitter user, who currently sits at more than 800,000 followers. And that's not even all of it. The manga industry was so furious with leakers that they tracked down and banned multiple leaking sources on platforms, one of them literally being this notorious account. Yes, you heard me right. This guy got banned, came back to continue leaking, and still managed to gain this large amount of following. But the worst part isn't just the leaks, it's the translations that came with leaks themselves. Let me explain further. When a chapter gets leaked, it usually comes through with butchered translations, or sometimes no translations at all. Because these originally Japanese written manga, when leaked, are translated either by fan translators or Google Translate, neither of which are accurate. And what comes with inaccuracy? Misinformation. The amount of misinformation that used to spread on a weekly basis because of incomplete and incorrect translations would usually lead to heavy misinterpretation by the fans and undeserved criticism by the haters. And since leaks had become the primary source for so many people, these misinformations would overshadow actual facts, especially considering that leaks would spread a few days before official chapters even released. This wave of misinformation is what began the Jujutsu Kaisen fans can't read memes. Because so many readers would run with blatant misinformation, they'd be labeled as someone who's incapable of reading. But slowly this would transform into Jujutsu Kaisen fans don't read. Because the problem wasn't even that JJK fans were illiterate. No, not at all. The true issue lies in the fact that they didn't even read what they were talking about. Most fans would start learning about the series through edits or memes. We'll touch this topic later on in the video, so just keep this in mind. 19th of April, 2023 would mark one of the biggest days in the anime manga community. It was on this day when leaks for chapter 221 would drop, in which everyone's beloved character, Satoru Gojo, would get unsealed. But wait, why is this Gojo guy getting unsealed such a big deal? Well, you see, from the very beginning, Satoru Gojo has been the biggest icon of JJK. People who don't even know what anime is know who Satoru Gojo is. He's like this new age Goku who happens to be one of the faces of the anime medium. But in the Shibuya incident, he would get imprisoned and set aside from the main story, and for 3 whole years he didn't get unsealed. This buildup of excitement is why the day the leaks for this chapter dropped, everyone went wild. Everyone, and I mean everyone in the anime community knew about it. His comeback was so generational that people who weren't even from the JJK fandom tapped into this chapter's leaks because it had just that much hype. Not only did Gojo get unsealed, this chapter also set up the biggest event of Jujutsu Kaisen, the battle of the strongest sorcerers. The big question was finally about to get answered as the most anticipated fight would finally happen. Satoru Gojo would face Ryomen Sukuna. People started going crazy. Sides were being changed so fast, memes were being made left and right. And Gojo's declaration of his upcoming victory would go on to become one of the biggest meme formats in not only the anime space, but the internet as whole. But to get to that moment, we have to first realize why that even happened. You see, Gojo versus Sukuna, as it was airing weekly, wasn't just any anime fight. It was the most discussed, most argued, and the most talked about battles at that moment. In fact, even after the fight had ended, people still continued to debate who was actually the strongest to this day. The fight invited so many people who've never even touched Jujutsu Kaisen in their life. They were here just for this fight, and this fight alone. The amount of popularity JJK had gained was insane. And the biggest contribution to this was actually the contents of the fight itself. Every new chapter that dropped would make people switch sides. If Sukuna slipped up, people would start making fun of him, calling him a fraud for using Mahoraga. If Gojo slipped up, people would make fun of his ego, saying he was overrated and never stood a chance. What I'm trying to say is that these rapidly changing situations inside the fandom made sure it never lost its hype. Never ask a Gojo fan what happened on the 30th of September 2023. 236, the chapter that mentally broke Jujutsu Kaisen fans.
I think it's actually Gojo.
Let me show you right now before you give it up.
Oh my god!
Satoru Gojo officially lost to Ryomen Sukuna, the strongest sorcerer in history. Everyone went nuts. It was unbelievable. People were so devastated that funerals for him were being held in real life. That is the closest we've had to anime actually breaking the internet ever since Goku vs. Jiren. That is the level Jujutsu Kaisen had touched. And this was just the beginning. Gojo's "Nah-I'd win" was turned into a meme. A manga panel that went triple platinum as a template. You could not escape it, anime or not. People from different fan bases started using the panel as a meme template. Everyone who had somehow not heard of Jujutsu Kaisen now couldn't stop hearing about it. This kickstarted Lobotomy Kaisen, the worst but somehow the best era of JJK. So many things happening at once. I mean, do you remember the Gojo figure incident? Yeah, let's not talk about that. All of this is without even mentioning the influence JJK had on other fandoms. Something I didn't really mention earlier was that while Gojo vs. Sukuna was happening, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 was also airing. Both the anime and the manga were sources of entertainment for the fans back-to-back, and this abundance of resource played a part in the sheer variety of things to discuss. A lot of people initially predicted that once Gojo vs. Sukuna would be over, JJK's popularity would take a beating. It only made sense that the people who only came around this fight would now tap out of the fan base, right? Well, the opposite actually started to happen. The fan base didn't stop growing. In fact, the Lobotomy, pushed by the anime as well as the reoccurring hype from the manga, just kept on producing more and more cursed trends. But then there's also lack of content. You see, during break weeks, fans didn't exactly have anything new to discuss about, as the manga didn't give them any new content, and that somehow would act as a catalyst for even more ridiculous discourses. Jujutsu Kaisen is not a static fandom. It just never rests. If there's no new content to talk about, they will literally make something up completely new, or they will bend certain things or misinterpret certain parts of the story to stretch them into long-term discourses. Take this image for example. Do you recall what this is? For those unaware, the context is that fans started calling everything Sukuna was doing an ass pull, and this art was used by fans to highlight the ridiculous amount of secret techniques that Sukuna had up his sleeves. Except it got the same treatment as this Gojo panel, flourishing into other fan bases. This is just one of many different examples of how influential JJK was at that time. I mean, it still is. Take this Naoya clip, just how many different variations have you seen of this clip on platforms? Flexibility is what matters, and it's not rare to see in an anime, but the reason JJK specifically manages to influence medias outside of anime is because it does it so well. And that takes me to my next point. Agenda Kaisen. The most fascinating thing about the JJK fandom that I haven't yet covered is the fact that it can be split into so many pieces at once. When I said the Chapter 236 incident mentally broke the fans, I wasn't entirely kidding. From the moment the chapter was leaked to quite literally the conclusion of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, certain Gojo fans were hoping that Gojo would come back from the dead. In fact, their belief was so strong that people who used to make fun of them gradually started respecting them for all the theories and genius analysis they would come up with to align their ideas of Gojo's revival with the main story. When Jujutsu Kaisen ended, so many fans were disappointed with the ending. There were actual criticisms, and there were nonsensical slanders. What I want to focus on, however, is Jujutsu no Kaisen. A fan was so disappointed with ending that they genuinely thought they could produce a better latter half of the story than the writer himself. It's safe to say that they were terribly wrong, and thankfully the JJK fans themselves also realized how terrible the fan ending itself was. In fact, it's still incomplete. I think the creator might have abandoned the idea because of the amount backlash. But why am I talking about this in specific? What relevance does this have with the topic of this video? Well, I want to highlight this one thing that I believe a lot of people overlook when it comes to JJK, and it's the fact that fans have twisted and manipulated events of the story so much that it has gone from simple misinformations to people straight up disrespecting the author, sending him death threats on his writing decisions, and proudly claiming they could write better than Gege Akutami himself. And at some point you have to step back and realize this isn't healthy at all. I mean, factor in everything I've said up until now. How do you engage in healthy discussions in a fan base where more than half the people haven't even watched or read the show? Remember when I said that we'll touch back onto the fact that most fans who actively interact with the fan base haven't even consumed the series? Well, this is where the most recent trend of Jujutsu Kaisen comes in. LARP Kaisen. Now, LARP originally means live-action roleplay, But TikTok has kind of twisted its meaning into basically when someone pretends to know about a series or talk about characters when they haven't actually consumed information about them the correct way. For those who are still confused, say you find someone asking, how is Sukuna the strongest sorcerer when he's called the King of Curses? While this is technically a logical question, anybody who's watched the series would know that Sukuna has been confirmed a human sorcerer multiple times, and that King of Curses is just a title. Nowhere in the series has it ever been stated that he's a cursed spirit of any sort. This was a weak example, but I think most of you should know what LARPing means within the current internet culture right now. That's why you're seeing so many memes about LARPing right now. If anybody asks something in a comment section, there will be someone immediately replying to them with something like, "LOL bro is LARPing." And this also happens with people who've read the series and just happen to forget things now and then, which is normal. This behavior causes actual JJK readers to step away from discussions. I think by now I've covered most of the relevant history of how the JJK fandom came about, to be the abomination it is today. However, with all that being said, I feel like I have been bad-mouthing the fan base way too much, and, to be honest, it's not that bad. I mean, sure, if you're discussing with someone, there is a 50-50 chance that they hasn't even consumed the series, or they have a secret agenda, or they're not speaking in honesty, or they're just straight up stupid. But truthfully, all of these are bad traits of basically every anime fan base. It's just that JJK's bad side gets highlighted so much that the good side isn't given the credit. I mean, there's so many JJK fans who are so coherent and talented. Maybe that's a topic for another video. One last thing that I want to add on is that I personally don't think that JJK has even reached half of its potential, and I mean it. So many people were saying that JJK would die when its manga ended, as people would have nothing to talk about anymore. When in reality, the complete opposite has happened and JJK's popularity has continued to grow. And considering that Gojo vs. Sukuna is still not animated, it's safe to say that the journey with JJK is still pretty long. With all that being said, that is all for uncovering the most insane fandom on the internet right now. This video did came out a little different than how I wanted it to be, but it's already pretty long, so I don't want to extend the script anymore. Thank you all for watching, and if you seriously stuck around till the end, I'd really appreciate feedback in the comments, as this is only my third ever long-form video. See y'all in the next one.